Let's take a look at one more example. Belisario made 36 cookies. He eats 2 cookies each day. Now for part 1, we want to find an equation that expresses the total number of cookies that Belisario has in terms of the number of days that have passed. So let's first identify what our variables are and what they mean. Okay, we have two variables here that we're measuring: the total number of cookies that Belisario has, and the number of days that have passed. Okay, so the total number of cookies and the number of days that have passed. Now, which is the independent variable, the x, and which is the dependent variable, the y? Well, in this case, we want to express the total number of cookies in terms of the number of days that have passed. Okay? So the total number of cookies should be our y because it's going to be in terms of another variable. The number of days that have passed is going to be our x, because we want to make sure the total number of cookies are in terms of or depend on the number of days that have passed. Okay? So we know we want a linear equation here. So we know we want something like y equals a plus bx. We need to identify the a and the b. Okay? The a is the y-coordinate of our y-intercept. It's often our starting point. Okay? It's the value when x is 0, right? Because if x is 0, this just goes away to 0, which means a is usually our starting point. So what are we starting with in this case? Well, Belisario made 36 cookies. That's what he is starting with. He is starting with 36 cookies total. Okay? So a is going to be 36. Now we got to find that b. What's the b? Well, we only got one other number here, so it's got to relate to the 2, right? But notice if we say plus 2x, this isn't going to make any sense, right? Because he starts with 36 cookies on day 0. So on day 0, he has 36 cookies. On day 1, if we plug that in, we get 36 plus 2 times 1, that's 38. So on day 0, he has 36 cookies. What does he do? He eats some cookies, and now he has 2 more. Well, that doesn't make sense. Okay, what's going on here? We failed to take into account the direction. He eats 2 cookies. If he's eating cookies, that means we're losing cookies, which means we should be counting this negative. Okay? So instead of plus 2x here, we want minus 2x. That slope is negative. Okay? And we need to make sure we include that negative. And now, on day 1, we could see that after 1 day, he's eaten 2 cookies, and so he's going to have only 34 cookies left. If we plug 1 in here, that's what we get. Okay, good. So we have the equation. Part 1 is done. Okay? Part 2, what is the y-intercept and how should we interpret this value? So the y-intercept, we can look at this very quickly. It's related to our a, right? It's a point xy. The x value is always 0, and the y value of the y-intercept is always this number here. It's the a. So 36. Okay, so this means on day 0, Belisario has 36 cookies. That's how many cookies he starts with. Okay, on day 0, that's what he has. So that's what that means. Okay, on to number 3. What's number 3 asking us? What is the slope, and how should we interpret this value? Okay, well, since we have the equation, the slope's pretty easy. The slope is just the value of b. So b equals, and make sure you take the sign with the number. Always keep that sign with the number. b is -2. Okay? What does a negative slope mean? Negative slope means that as you go on, you're going downhill. Left to right, you go downhill, right? Which means the line has a downhill. The line is going downhill left to right. And in the context of this problem, here's our x-axis, here's our y-axis, which means the more days that pass, let's draw it up here actually, the more days that pass, the fewer cookies Belisario has left. So the more days that pass, the fewer cookies Belisario has left. Okay, last question. After 6 days, how many cookies does Belisario have? Okay, so it's telling us this. This is how many days. The number of days is the x. It's how many days have passed. Okay? And we want to know how many cookies does Belisario have after that amount of time has passed. That's y. Y is the total number of cookies. We know how x and y is related. So I'm going to use this relationship to plug in when, after 6 days have passed, how many cookies do we have left? Okay? So I'm going to take my equation, which is y equals 36 minus 2x, and I'm going to plug in x equals 6, since that's how many days have passed. So if I plug in x equals 6, I get y equals 36 minus 2 times 6, and I don't even need a calculator for this one. That's 36 minus 12. That's 24. Which means after 6 days, Belisario has 24 cookies left.